Greetings to everyone. Welcome to today's class. My name is Bohdan Soroyed. I'm Professor Doctor of Music Education, and today I'll be your professor at composition. Specifically, we'll be looking at Brahms's Intermezzo. Johannes Brahms is a composer who was well known for rewriting his pieces and working on them on multiple occasions through several years. Like that's the case of his first symphony, which took him over 10 years. Of course, in the span of that process, he was working on multiple pieces at the time. And he actually continued that motivic development and logic that we can see inherited from the music of Beethoven. And a lot of the times Brahms's music is compared to Beethoven's, and we can see like Beethoven's 10th symphony sometimes is what we call Brahms's first. Now, of course, Brahms had his own personality, and that personality became very subtle and refined, particularly in his later compositions. Right now, we're looking at an intermezzo, the second piece of Opus 118, some of the oldest pieces that, the last pieces that Brahms published at his senior years. And in this piece, we can see an absolute mastery and craft of all of the compositional techniques that we can see. Romantic conservative style with counterpoint. So without further ado, we'll start doing, as we did with previous pieces, a performance of it, going through the different passages. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the 50 people that signed up to my YouTube channel. So far, it's been great to see that the video is receiving this great attention, but I'd like also to hear from you in the comments. So please provide me a little bit of your background and explain what is interesting you in my videos, what's your musical background, what would you like to see more in this channel. And as I've mentioned at the beginning, the whole point of the channel is to provide materials to my current composition students, so they have a solid foundation on the main compositional techniques. In the future, I'd like to feature some of my students' works and comment upon those, and also analyze my own pieces. So without further ado, let's start listening as I play the intermezzo. That's the first phrase. We can clearly point it there. And that's the answer to that one. Then Brahms continues with that idea. And final statement. Right, so that closes the first block that's based around that theme. We'll call all of this A so far. And now, as we keep looking at the piece, probably the B section, the broader B section, would have to be after this double bar that we see here. So everything that happens in this first part will be labeled with different letters of A. A1 has these 4 phrases, so we'll be analyzing them one at a time. And A2 starts here, so let's put A2. It starts halfway through. right, so as we can see, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we have another set of 4, and then we have this phrase here. Let me spot again where was the beginning of that one. Right, it's clearly this, the second phrase. And it opens there. And probably it would be more accurate to consider the F sharp as a pickup. There. And then we have this final one, which goes here. That opens there. And it's beautiful to see that theme in the bass. Probably this is another sectional division phrase. Then we have this. So this previous one would be ideally connected with all of that. This is the next phrase. And there we go with this. And repetition. So far we can see the first section is A1, which is based around this. Then we have A2, which is based around that neighbor tone. Then we have clearly a new texture, so I would dare to call this A3. And all of that leads to that part where we have clearly, as we can see, that A2 phrase is again retaken here, so we can call this A2 prime with, and it acts a little bit like a codetta, right? It's this codetta ending phrase. Of course, the most ending idea, this is the closing idea that we're getting here. So that's the one that sounds more closing. And prior to that, well, we're seeing A3. Technically here, another thing, which is A4, right? Which developed there. The only thing with A3 being this short, probably the logic would tell us that we could connect it and merge it somewhere. So let's see how this is dealt in the recapitulation. So in the recapitulation, which begins here, we're seeing this. That is very similar indeed to the way that we can see A1 unfolds, but A1 had originally 4 phases, right? And the second time we hear A1, which is sounding here, it's only 2 phrases. So Brahms is doing clearly a condensation, apart from some minor changes that we can see in the harmonic texture and in the counterpoint and melodic lines. Then we can see again the A2, which we can recognize with that neighbor tone. And then again this new idea, which is A3. So A2 is the same. Then you have this short A3 that leads to this final A4. After which A2 prime is retaken almost identically. So yes, in a way, what Brahms is doing with this structure is presenting different themes, 1, 2, 3, three themes, and then he is retaking them here with 4 and 2 again and doing the coda. Probably that's what we can say about the organization of the first part. Let's look at the B part. The B part probably is one of the most beautiful contrapuntal writings that we find in Brahms. It's this beautiful imitation between right and left hand. With a 3 against 2 rhythm. And Brahms does that with the repetition, so that would be B1. Then we have B2, which continues with that canon. Right? It's in a major key, that's B2. And then we have B1 prime. So section B is pretty much straightforward in this sense. Brahms is doing a ABA form inside of that. B1, B2, B3. B1, B2, B1 per prime. So we have 1, 2, 1 prime. Now, section 1, on the other hand, it's much more complicated. So in A, we have all of these different repetitions. And probably what we're labeling here as A4 could be better connected and explained as a variation of A1, because that melody, it's in the bass, right? And we can clearly hear it. So I would rather go than labeling this A4, because 4 ideas, it's a lot of ideas, label this as A1, and then it continues here and develops. And then you have A2, which actually makes more sense, because what you have is a section that's made of 5 parts, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2. In a way, it's again like a small ABA inside of that. So Brahms is dealing this with that form. And if we apply this, we will need to update the end and also label this as A1, right? Now the A3 could be also a little transition, so I don't feel like this has a big structural impact. So A3, it's more of a transition or little bridge that's connecting 2 points. So I would label it here in both cases as a transition. In which case, well, we're left then with just the 2 main ideas, A1 and A2. And then we have A1 and A2 again here, and that closing idea. That seems to make a lot of sense to me, and it's probably the way that we can organize our analysis. So that would be the first thing to do, to see a little bit the different parts. In these pieces, structure tends to be free, so you might find different variations of the structural development, and sometimes, as in this case, we can see that Brahms is, well, playing with a slightly freer form within the sum of the parts, like in this case, the section A. Right, so let's begin by looking at the first phrase. The phrase itself is based in the key of A major. That's quite clear and straightforward. And since there are 4 phrases like this, the first thing to look is a little bit the relationship between them. So the first phrase has this melody. And the melody is based around this first cell, which is the descending second, that's followed by an ascending motion of a third. And probably these two ingredients are the ones that explain, well, 90% of the musical fabric that we're going to be seeing. So you might be wondering, well, where is the third? The third is right after, repeated. So we have this third ascending and answered descending, right? We can see it there. And of course, the third is a very common interval because it's used to build chords. So harmony is all based around thirds, and we can see many instances of that third. And the other concept is this descending second, which is very prominent. It's well presented here in two parts, descending. So we have it like this, right? And then we have twice down. Now that descending motion is really contradicted. So the first phrase goes like first down and then up, and then the second time is going up and then down, right? So it's a very beautiful way of structuring a phrase when you have this type of logic of one plus one idea, one bar, and then two. We can see this in a lot of classical music, and many times that's the type of thing that organizes the very classical essence of Mozart. So if we pick Mozart's C major sonata, it's organized in the same exact way. You have one formula, one, and then you have two, the same repetition of one. So it's one and one, two. And then you have an entire block continuous of two. Right? And that type of organization was used also by Beethoven, and that's where basically Brahms is taken more directly. You know? So 1 + 1 + 2 gives us a very straightforward thematic organization and structure, and it's the one that he uses in all four phrases. So if we can keep playing. It's 1, 1, and 2. Again, 1, 1, 2, right, and so forth. So how do we explain the structure of having so many repetitions within this? Well, the first thing is that these phrases should be grouped into a compound period. So a compound period is a specific structure in which we usually have 16 bars where you have 2 sentences, and each of which is equal to 4 phrases. Now, if we want to see this with a clearer visualization, I would rather here paint a little tree that explains this organization. So I'll put a fine pencil here and explain it. So we have 16 bars. These 16 bars we divide into 2 groups of 8, and subsequently we divide them into groups of 4. That's what exactly Brahms does here. Now, the first group of 4, which I'll put here with blue, and the second one, and the third one, sorry, is based on the same material, whereas number 4, that's red here, is based on a different one. And that repetition of the blue material, which I like to call opening idea, OI, repeated there, is what gives the entire piece this sense of repetition and coherence. So if I go closer and I put here the color, I'll put the underline. We here have the blue, right? So that's going to be the blue. We can see how it's again repeated here in those bars. I'll play the melody of bars 1 through 4. That's exactly what we see here. Whereas the red one, which I call closing idea, CI, is providing us with a contrast. So let's give it a red color here. So as we can see, it starts the same way in this case. But it's going to a different place, right? So that's what makes usually a period. You would have something that's an opening idea, then it's having its contrast, then you repeat the same opening idea and a contrast. What's particularly interesting about this period is that usually normal compound periods have, as I've said, 2 sentences, and these 2 sentences are 4 phrases. But in Brahms's case, he's not doing 2 sentences. He's making a compound period of 2 periods. So inside each of these, and that's kind of the next level of articulation. So if I'm going to be copying this music further, let's put those 4 here, and I have here the blue ones, right? Inside each of them, Brahms is doing exactly the same structure. So he's doing first 2 bars that are repeated all across, which are the opening idea, OI, and inside, after that, he's doing the closing idea, another set of 2 bars. And that allows him technically to repeat something which is not very correct in the classical canon. Like, we try to avoid that. He allows him to repeat 4 times an opening idea, and we can see it clearly here. In order to distinguish this, I'll be putting those red and blue colors above, so I'll be painting them above. We can see here the blue color, so that's the opening idea, and it's always the same. There is repeated 4 times, and then the closing idea is each time different. Well, each time that the broad texture allows us to do so, because also we have a little repetition of that. So we can see here that's been repeated 4 times. Right. And the closing ideas changed. First time is this, second time. Then we have the same one repeated. That's what makes this broader period structure. And then we have a little variation of the second one. Right, so that will be the overall structure of this first. Now, it's very impressive how with so little Brahms achieves to do 16 bars. Of course, it's kind of repetitive, and that repetition is allowing Brahms to explore different techniques and different ways of harmonizing and approaching the same idea. And I think that that's kind of the great lesson we can learn from this opening by seeing how the first time Brahms is harmonizing with an open fifth, that interval. The second time he is doing is very different. We have this G natural, which is a diminished chord, and it goes to first inversion. The first time it was a second inversion. Then we have a similar one, and then the repetition is on that second one. So Brahms is really like exploring different options that you have to approach the simple melodic idea, and at the same time he's doing so in one technique that really we can see a lot in Beethoven, especially after his Eroica Symphony. And it's this metric shifting or metric modulation where we try to have the downbeat of the piece shifted or felt in a different position. And this is clearly achieved by this pickup feel that we have at the beginning of these phrases, but sometimes it's even more prominently achieved, like in A2, with the avoidance of having any strong harmony on the downbeat. And it clearly feels like we are in a 3/4 where the downbeat is on the third bar. And then when he wants to have something on the downbeat, he has to add one extra beat, and it sounds like we are having 3, 3, 4, 2. It's a very asymmetrical grouping. And similarly here at the beginning, we're having this shifted rhythm, 1, 3, 3, and then 4, and then 2. Exactly the same rhythm. And that rhythm of 3, 3, 4, and 2 with the downbeat there is what characterizes this piece, and also it characterizes the later pieces of Brahms, where he is consciously avoiding that. And we can also see it in some of his earlier compositions for piano, chamber music, and symphonies. So this trademark of Brahms' style can be seen not just in rhythmic ambiguity, but also in harmonic ambiguity. So how is Brahms being ambiguous harmonically? Let's just think about it from the classical perspective. If a classical composer was to score this, usually you would expect the downbeat to fall, to start on the lower note. And also you would expect to have some perfect cadence. But Brahms is really delaying that sense of dominant until the very last moment. And in doing so, he is playing with this plagal feel where we're almost as if, and the second time it's even more prominent, we're feeling as we are in the key of D major. Right, in a sort of D Lydian scale. Time is harmonized differently, right? And in doing so, what Brahms is trying to create is a unique harmonic sound in a unique harmonic world, where the sense of the classical tonality, as we know, is being very abstracted. And you might be wondering, like, of course, this is all section, this is all A1, no? But where is the perfect cadence on A major? Well, there is no perfect cadence as such, because what we can see it, here we end on the dominant, here we end on the dominant, here we are ending on the dominant, and there again. So Brahms is doing 4 times the ending on the dominant. He is clearly making his best to, well, delay the sense of having a perfect cadence on A major. And you might be seeing afterwards the chord of C major. This little transition is going to D, but really A major as such only appears here at the very end. This closing idea, well, and especially the second time A2 is presented here, is the only time that we're feeling A as the tonic with the bass, because all of the other ones are these delays where we're feeling more of a D Lydian feel, and then modulations with D sharp to the key of E major, or directly an emphasis on the subdominant here, on the dominant of E major. So let's now dive deeper and write a little bit the harmony of this. Brahms is starting with the 1 chord, moving to 4. Right, we're hearing there the subdominant, and then he stays on that subdominant for 2 bars. That's a 5, right? Well, we can write the inversions because they're not too difficult to notate. That second inversion, this is dominant 7th. 4th inversion, tonic, and first inversion. Then we have B minor, which is the 2nd degree in root position. And after that, ensuing part is tonic with the first, second inversion, and dominant. So this structure is exactly the same harmony as we're seeing later in the second time, so I won't copy it there. And the red one, which is the other one, is a dominant of the fourth. So there with the second inversion, the fourth degree with the first inversion, that's the tonic and second inversion, the dominant of the dominant with the first inversion, which eventually becomes even a fourth inversion. And after that, Brahms is playing with this dominant, first inversion, feel, and dominant of the dominant. We have dominant, first inversion, then it's not letting me write it. Right, there we go. Then it's dominant of the dominant, fourth inversion. Well, not dominant of the dominant. This is like the second, the sixth degree. So we have it there with the seventh and first inversion, and that ends with the dominant of the dominant, this, and dominant. Now you might be wondering, what is the role of this sixth degree here? Well, the role of that sixth degree primarily is to have a 2-5-1 in the key of E major. Thinking of it from the key of E major, it's a 2, 5, and 1 in the key of E major. Whereas if we're thinking it from the key of A major, we're having the sixth degree, the dominant of the dominant, and the dominant. Right, so what is this harmony telling us? Well, it's telling us once more how great composers played with the speed of different chords by trying to expand and compress the motion and the rate at which we're changing chords. Here, we're very static. We're just staying on the same chord, right? And then we're having very fast changes. Then again, we have slightly slower rhythm, of course, with movement. And then again, faster, right? And it's exactly the same thing that Brahms does afterwards, so probably we could even technically label this second and the third and the fourth phrase as A1 prime, because it's just a variation of that. And actually he gets rid of that A1 prime next time. So more things about it. Well, the writing of Brahms, it's exquisite in terms of counterpoint, and we can see so many different lines that are just proving his genius that it's even hard to know where to start with. Like, let's start with the descending arpeggio that we were highlighting. This arpeggio connects literally F sharp to this low D. So it's an arpeggio that comes across. At the same time that that arpeggio is happening, you have this octave leap. It's repeated twice, and it goes beautifully in contrary motion with the right hand. So you have there already that contrary motion in place, which is again implied here. You also have it there. That's opening, that's closing. Brahms, the second time, opens with a slightly different strategy. He's going with this scale, right? That's his bass line. Again, perfectly in contrary motion, trying to have these opposite directions between top and bass, right? And in the inner parts, well, the writing is equally very well taken care of. So you have this second melody, which is right. So clearly it's a filler, but that filler is also moving around and having its own direction, right? The thirds, as I was saying, are everywhere, so we can see thirds here. Let's highlight them with the yellow. So you have thirds here, grouped. There we have the inversion of that third. There are more thirds here, there. So Brahms is like really trying to reuse and present that interval all across. And then the interval of the descent, that descending second, well, it's also equally present. You can see it here with an inversion, right? So first time it's, then it's, then we have this. And the second phrase, also there, right? So Brahms is organizing very clearly his texture all around those two main materials. Also, it's very interesting and impressive why Brahms goes for the high A instead of the low one. Because if we think about it, it's not very melodically correct. Like these angular lines where you're jumping from a B up to an A, high A. But it's extremely expressive and effective. What would happen if I would play that A an octave below? It would sound like this. Right? It really loses a lot of energy, especially if we know the tune. We would expect it to go to this. Now, Brahms had to present, and this is something that we see a lot of the times, the different notes of the arpeggio that are the essential points of the tonality. So in this case, we're in the A major key, and the main notes that you would expect to hear are the A, C sharp, and E. And they fall in a very strategic places. So C sharp is the first note. Now A in the melody is highlighted there. And E becomes the climax or climactic point of the next. So you have it in these three beautiful places, and that's really what makes this melody great. And it's the presence of this broader arpeggio. I mean, sometimes classical composers, like we saw in Beethoven's case, from the beginning they just did an arpeggio, and that was their theme. Now in this case, the arpeggio is really hidden, but it's making the theme work, and it's present in all four phrases. So we have that arpeggio there. And what's really fascinating and beautiful about all of this writing is how Brahms manages to sound modern and relatively abstract with so few means, and at the same time so elegant style. So the harmony that he is using isn't as such completely revolutionary, but the fact that he is placing this offbeat, the fact that we're having all of these lines overlapping almost like in this type of Baroque counterpoint gives Brahms's music a very unique sonority and makes it really great. Now, the second time, the phrase, as we highlighted, has the same main notes. We have C sharp, A, and E. It's all present there, but it goes obviously to the same chord, and this is very interesting. It goes to the same chord with a very different feel, and that's something you wouldn't expect, or you wouldn't hear in many composers, because usually composers would rather just go to a different chord. But Brahms clearly goes, and this ending is melodically always the same. I'm highlighting it here. So you have always A in G sharp. Right, it's always the same. But that melodic motion, which is, by the way, the beginning descending, sounds very different each time. So the first time that we are hearing it, it sounds as if we are in this D, prolonged D, but we're moving with a half cadence to the dominant, right? So from the subdominant to the dominant. And the second time that we're hearing it, it actually feels as if we are modulating, or as if we're going to a different tonality, as we're going actually to the dominant by the fact of adding all of the D sharps. Here we have the D sharp. Resolves there. Also, a very fascinating thing about Brahms's writing that we can effectively learn and apply to our compositions is these details, like avoidance of repeating in certain points the leading tone. Clearly Brahms here is doing a B dominant 7th chord, and he could have added the D sharp there. It would sound like this. And there is technically nothing wrong with that, but of course by not using it and having it in the bass, he's having a much more correct sound. Of course, you might be arguing, but that's something that he doesn't do in other places. Well, here he, for instance, duplicates the leading tone. But in this moment in particular, the fact that he's avoiding that D sharp gives much more protagonism to the bass line, which has to add this new note. It gives a complete new feeling and meaning to the melody. We're like learning reharmonizations from Brahms, because the first time Brahms is actually managing, and this is quite incredible, he's managing the sense of dissonance and tension by not changing the chord. We're having for 2 measures D major, but when we listen to it, it doesn't sound like a static chord. It sounds like we're having resolution, tension, resolution, tension, resolution, right? So we're having that sense of tension. And partially, of course, it's achieved by the fact that Brahms is having added tones. Like if we think of D major, what is C sharp doing? It's the 7th. What is B doing? It's this added 6. G sharp, it's actually the 11th. So these are really advanced notes within the D major chord. But the second time Brahms does, he adopts a slightly more traditional position, which is having D sharp, having different chords, and he by doing so he's modulating like to this D sharp that goes to E. But what he does is he always tries to find a different harmonization to the same melody, and that actually makes a quite remarkable difference between these two phrases. So the first phrase ends there on that dominant, and the second one arrives with that feeling of modulation. Right, so having said this, what we see in A1 prime is this little addition of the F natural. The F natural is the flat 9 of the dominant chord. So by doing so, it arrives at the diminished chord, G sharp diminished, which with the E is the dominant 7th with a flat 9. And having these passing tones where appoggiaturas on the downbeat, he enriches the harmony, and instead of having here just a straightforward A major, you arrive almost in a C sharp minor 7th chord that resolves into A major. And the last time where we're seeing a very similar repetition of that, but he's presenting us with this magical sound of an augmented chord. So you're having that, it's an augmented chord that happens from the passing tones. And then they arrive there, right? So what is A2 really based around? Well, A2, as such, starts from the neighbor tone idea, and of course that neighbor tone undulation is basically the pink motive that we had at the beginning, a descending second. And the accompaniment, which is basically a C major chord in first inversion, it's a derivation or an expansion of the arpeggio ideas that we had there with their descending arpeggio. Now instead of descending, Brahms is just moving up and down, right? Which kind of connects the motion of both hands with that ascending and descending undulation. And even there, well, Brahms is trying to achieve that contrary motion and phrases like this. Well, the rhythm of that we already commented. It's particularly fascinating how he does this 3-3 and then 4-2 rhythm with a symmetrical feeling. Now, you might be wondering, what is C major doing here? Because how do we explain C major if we're in the key of A major? Firstly, it's going to be the third degree. That's a very strong statement. C major, third degree. So the best way to understand and explain this chord, in my view, is from the previous key that we were in. So if we understand that we were arrived at E major, and E major we have this as the tonic, and then the 6th degree, flat 6 degree is actually the C natural, right? And that flat 6 that we would have in E major that C natural becomes now a chord. And it sounds like this. A very modern sonority is what I like to call the mediant, chromatic mediant relationship, because if you think about it, we're moving from E major to C, it's a relationship of mediants, not dominants. The dominant relationship would be from G to C. That's classical music. 5-1, 5-1. Modern relationships of mediant sounds like this. We're going from E major to C major, right? And it goes like this. E major, no C. Where do we see that? Of course, we see that in Liszt a lot. He likes to go with these triads. And even further, you could include A flat. Right, like that. But in this case, it's also a common tone modulation, because the E, which is the dominant, becomes a pedal point. And here is the real spiciness of that Brahms is really doing a pedal point on the dominant. And then he's doing a prolongation there of the A, right? And then we have another pedal point on the dominant. So really, like, the whole point of this A2, which starts here, probably I would even integrate it with this A3 transition, is that Brahms is trying to build upon the concept of pedal points. And by doing so, what we are seeing is different harmonizations of the same note. So you can harmonize E, of course, as E major. You can also harmonize it as C major. And equally, you can harmonize it as he does afterwards with an E diminished and E dominant sevenths. And those are actually all of the chords that he is doing there. So have dominant on top of E, then E, C major, diminished, dominant, and then we arrive to, again, dominant up top. So what are the different chords we see? Dominant up top of tonic, so that's like this one. And we see the tonic, and we see the flat 6. We see the tonic as a diminished chord. And then we see the tonic as a dominant seventh. Right, all of this seen from the perspective of E major, right? If we are seeing it from A major, on the other hand, we would be seeing dominant, third degree, Here, that's going to be diminished, so dominant diminished. And then we have dominant seventh, and that eventually goes to the tonic. Right? That's the harmonic. Quite a unique one, because he's then trying to do a sequence with that by trying to replicate it. So we have here this sequential repetition. I think it's with T. Repetition that goes from E to A. Right, and it keeps expanding. That's a very beautiful motion. You have A, B, and that expansion is accompanied by a descending bass line. So that's what we're basically seeing here. It's a texture supported by that motion in the inner parts. You have the arpeggio. And we have the melody. Which is, by the way, the most simplest part of all, and the most basic one compared to all of the complexity that's surrounding it. And within that melody, of course, the motive, the predominant motive, is the second one, the motive of the second, and we can see it here. But at the same time, he manages to replicate the original cell, which is the second, right, which we see here, by doing it. And of course, that repetition of the full cell goes in more places. We can see it here. And he does it even further. Right? And it's almost sounding as this is an exact copy of what you have in the beginning. It's exactly the same melody, in fact, but it's completely differently harmonized. And that's kind of the surprising thing. So probably when we were highlighting here the sections, this is another thing to reflect upon. And if we were to give A1 prime somewhere, it's got to be there. Because that's the actually place of repetition. We're seeing the very beginning repeated. And of course, then another phrase starts there after that. So, return back to A2. What else can we say about this? Well, the rhythm is shifted as we saw it, and it returns back down on the downbeat right there. Then we have this sequential expansion. Harmonically, what is Brahms doing? Here now he's clearly in the key of A major, so I'm no longer going to be using two tonalities to explain the chords. We're having the flat 6. Then Brahms is doing what we call a German augmented 6 chord. So augmented 6 chords are the ones that have the leading tone above and below of the dominant. If I'm in the key of A major, the dominant is E. And I would have the leading tone D sharp going to E and the descending leading tone F going to E. These two leading tones create the chord. And depending on which notes you have inside of it, you would have the German augmented 6, you could have the French augmented 6, or you could have the normal Italian augmented 6, which is the simplest of all. Now here Brahms is doing the full German one, which sounds like a dominant 7th chord. It sounds almost as we're doing F major, dominant 7th. And then you have this diminished. And what I really like about it is how that F sharp A is repeated there. Brahms is expressively combining that to create the counterpoint. So when we arrive to this chord, that's the D sharp diminished, that's the dominant of the dominant diminished chord. And this diminished expansion is really long, prolongated, after which we arrive to the dominant, which is basically this pedal point that we're seeing there. Pedal point standing on the dominant. Right, dominant. Whereas previously, what we see, it's first a standing on the dominant, a resolution to the tonic, this expansion to the dominant of the dominant, and then back to dominant. So if we were to explain and summarize this A2, what we're seeing is E, dominant, tonic, expansion, dominant of the dominant, and dominant. And then it resolves. And it's interesting because Brahms somehow manages to resolve this not to A major, you would expect, well, I'm in E, but he's turning last minute that E into this first inversion A major in and goes to D major. That's why I explained at the beginning that really what Brahms is creating here is this D-Lydian feel. And we're not really like having a clear sense of A major. It's purposely avoided by expanding this D major chord, prolongation of D major. And you might be wondering, well, what's Lydian? Lydian is the mode that you have on the 4th degree. It sounds like that. And it's very much the sonority that Brahms is having there with that prolongation, which makes it sound modern because modes are really used by modern composers. And we saw that in Debussy and afterwards, well, it's been used throughout the 20th century nowadays. So after this beautiful part, what we're seeing is a master class of how to harmonize a chromatic scale on top of a pedal point. Because Brahms is doing a straightforward chromatic scale that goes upwards. We can see it raising to the C sharp and then even D. And it reaches that D. But at the same time, the chords that are happening on top of that, some are really clear, like this dominant, but others are kind of looking for ambiguity. So we have E major, then we have this, which could be technically A minor. So that's the tonic, minor tonic, right? Notice that we haven't even heard a perfect cadence, and now we're hearing the cadence of going to the minor tonic, right? Brahms plays with both modes, major and minor. Then you have the diminished. So how do we explain this diminished chord? The diminished chord technically is the dominant of F sharp going to B, right? So we have to think of it as the dominant of the second, right? Dominant of second. So we have, right? And that goes to the dominant, right? Those were passing tones, so it goes back to the dominant. We have it there, dominant 7th. Another diminished chord, which is happening right there. And then it goes to the tonic in major, right? So, and after that we're having the dominant, as I said, of the 4th. So that's 5 of 4. That harmony is being supported primarily, as you can see, by these arpeggios that are moving with an interval that we can clearly identify, and it's this third, descending third, that Brahms tries to counterest to the ascending motion of the other third that's moving, or leap that we're seeing that's going upwards, right? So that upward motion is contradicted with those descending And at the same time, well, the seconds that we're seeing, they're basically the pink motif that we were seeing with the seconds. So Brahms is exploring that material, or even like more this way, to create the different variations that you get of the materials. So that's the beauty in the logic of this A2. Let's play it. Then we have this repetition. That's like a climactic point, but after that we have a build-up. So dance and arrive there to a climax. Very glorious. I of course added a couple of octaves there down below, but it really enhances like the feel that you're getting of culminating on that A. And that's clearly, again, not even A major, it's D major. So he is continually playing with that prolongation of D major, that Lydian mode, right? And just look at the cadences. That's the Lydian cadence. And after this, you would expect him to, well, be moving to tonic, but he does not so after a very prolongated standing on this D mode. So this is like the expansion of D Lydian, and we can see it here very clearly with this harmonization of the theme. So the main melody, I can probably give it again the same color. So we have there with that descending second. All of that is a descending second, by the way. So the main melody, it's being reused primarily with the motif of the second and the third down there in the bass, and then with an inversion above, right? So that's a very beautiful inversion because it's almost identical, perfect inversion. You would expect that's second and third, second and seventh, and now I have second and third, second and seventh. And it's based on the same type of 1-1-2 logic. So that's a perfect inversion of the main theme. And it kind of blends very nicely from having this exchange of voices where the theme was transferred down below. In order to give more density to the texture, Brahms is playing with syncopation, right? So here, clear sense of syncopation, not only to delay the downbeat, which is like syncopated there, but also to create this pulsing, constant pulsation that we were seeing previously. So from this point onward, actually, the flow of eighth notes was constant. You were having them all the time. And once you arrive at this point, that allows us expressively to dissolve that movement and, well, arrive eventually to that final cadence. So Brahms is doing here, and that's like the interesting ambiguity, structural ambiguity, right? So we have a formal ambiguity. We don't really know what this is, where he is doing the theme, and it's a beautiful A1 prime variation, continuing still with the texture of B, of A2, right? This second part that you had, probably here with this transitional feel. And at the same time, it's a completely unique harmonization of the opening. So the opening first was harmonized like this. Now we're seeing great masterclass on how to expand the same theme the second time in the culmination, and so smoothly transfer it to the left hand. And then do the minor variation of that. Continue with an inversion of the theme with imitations. You have an imitation there. And after that, we're again having the A2 theme. Originally it was modulating and going somewhere. Now it's very stuck. And finally Brahms is giving us a perfect cadence on the tonic. Look at how he really avoids to have the conventional cadence, because the cadences that we have are this, which is very beautiful. It's not anything like that. And also the second one is this D major on top of E that goes to the dominant with the 13th and resolves into an open position, very open wide. Right. Apart from being again the same melody that we would expect with the second and third, and then the second and the seventh. So Brahms is even there managing to introduce the theme. There, second and seventh. We have it there as an ending, finally in the right key, which is in A major and not in D major or D Lydian as we were seeing it before. So let's label some of these things that I was mentioning. Here we have this beautiful descending scale. Descending scale. It's D Lydian as I feel it. And then it turns into this D Dorian. So Brahms is really being a modal composer here. D Dorian. And after that, we can continue with that feel of D Lydian. We're having G sharp and we're cadencing on D major. So it sounds like 5-1. He has the dominant of the dominant. Is the same harmonization we were seeing here. Right, same of fourth to dominant of the first inversion. And once we arrived there, well, Brahms is leading with a series of perfect cadences. So let's continue with the harmonic analysis. From this point, we had technically this would be dominant of the fourth. Major fourth. Here we have the fourth and first inversion. Then that's going to be dominant with the 13th. I'll find it. Then you have the fourth degree and root position. That fourth is prolongated with all of these different things, and then you have the fourth minor, right? After that, we're having first inversion of the tonic going to the fourth, which is what I call this Lydian cadence. Then you have again the tonic 1 and first inversion going to the dominant of the dominant, first inversion, and from there, that point onward, we're having the tonic with a second inversion, a dominant with the 13th. Brahms is really using that C sharp a lot. That goes to second degree with the root position and dominant seventh, and that resolves eventually to this tonic with the dominant on top of it as an appoggiatura. Right, there are plenty of appoggiaturas in all across. I mean, you have also a lot of imitations. Like this is a clear example of a motive that's being imitated across. Right, he tries actually to combine them. Right, so we have that B seventh, it's now happening at the same time. It's a very beautiful condensation of an imitation. Yeah, I haven't seen that in many composers. So right, in order to combine it, he does this, and at the same time it's, so we have like both versions of the same motive at once. And Brahms' scale continues there. The descent, by the way, is very prominent, and the descending scale really allows us to have a couple of things, but the main thing is a dissolution of tension. So if here we arrive to a climax for multiple reasons. First reason is the recapitulation. Second reason, it's a continuation of this transitional buildup. It's a very complex reharmonization also of the main theme, but it's also the section after which we have a dissolution. And so Brahms is dissolving the tension and the texture with this lowering range in a much more prominent presence of the motive and the bass. So here Brahms is having a lot of fun with those inversions, and we arrive eventually to A2, which I called first time almost like this codetta ending phrase. Well, if you want to give the proper codetta, it could be probably placed here with that closing idea. This is more like it already has the pedal point of the tonic, so that's what it gives it, the closing feeling. But as the phrase in which Brahms is doing basically the recapitulation of A2, but with a resolution, right? If there we had it with tension, here it's no tension, but it's repose, right? And it's tonic, and it's conclusive feeling of tonic. And it's exactly how Brahms arrives to that moment. So the rhythm of this is always fascinating, because it's always this delayed group of 3, then you have the group of 4, and then you have 2. And that's something that I would encourage all of you to practice. So try to have these. Actually, it can be even divided. This group of 4 could be divided into 2, 2, and 2. Technically speaking, that's an emiola. So when you have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, that's the classical rhythm of a hemiola, and it's basically what we're seeing here. So probably that division that I did of 4 could be split there too. So you're seeing pam 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 pam. It's clearly going in 2. But at the same time, what makes Brahms's music unique is that he is not doing 1, 2, 3, but he's doing 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, right? And basically, that is shifted. So instead of having just 3, 3, 2, 3, 3, and 2, 2, 2, in the common sense, what we're seeing is that would be the easiest way probably to play it. So it's where you're having the downbeat out of place by anticipation. And we're feeling it right there, right? And well, that's basically what we can say about this phrase. Harmonically, it's very beautiful. It's just a set of descending thirds, something that Brahms later on explores in other intermezzos like this one. It's this descending set of thirds. And you have it here. It's almost like we're going with endless thirds down the piano. And what is the harmony behind it? The harmony behind it's also going in thirds. You have the first degree. You go a third down, we arrive at the 6th degree. If you go a third down, you arrive to the 4th degree, and that's what Brahms does. If you go a third down, you're going to the 2nd degree, and that's exactly what we see here. And after the 2nd, the logical thing is to have the 7th, which is the equivalent of the dominant, and that's what he does there, dominant and tonic. That harmony is repeated twice, so we have the 2nd time the same harmony. With an expansion of the 2nd, then 5, with a resolution there. As I said, it's extremely unconventional and beautifully harmonized, because you're having there a sus4 chord, so this is a dominant with a 7th, but it's suspended, so the 4th is suspended. And when you see in the C sharp, that's the 13th of the chord, and that goes to the tonic. Now, you might be wondering, what is the 13th? So if I'm in E, that's E major, E dominant 7th, 9th is the F sharp, and then the 13th is that C sharp. Right, so that's the chord that we're seeing. You might be saying, wondering, who did this before Brahms? Many composers did it, even Baroque composers in particular. But Chopin, in his first ballade, is doing exactly that same. He's playing with that 13 feel. Right. So, more things about this. Well, the way that it's organized, again, it's based around the seconds that we were seeing there, so not much can be added to that. It's a beautifully phrased melody that goes up and down, and the 2nd down it even goes higher, right? So something remarkable how he makes this theme sound very different in different occasions. Just to compare them, I play them in a row. So the first time it sounds like this. Right? Then he does. Then this is his next variation. Or I skip to that one, and the one before that is this. So those are basically 4 times the same statement, but Brahms here is clearly teaching you how he is capable of arriving at different textures, different harmonies, and different solutions. Whereas at the beginning, for instance, the repetition was really quite straightforward, and you had 4 phrases that were almost identical. They had these minor differences. So, continuing with this, and we're going to enter the most beautiful part, which is the middle section, right? And probably before I comment that part, I'd like to just briefly explain the A prime, because A prime, now that we have all of this A section in our head very fresh, isn't such a big difference. It's a very similar approach, but Brahms does throw some contrapuntal jewels like this one. So you can see here that's the same, but now he has this descending scale with diminished chords that resolve and become a dominant 7th and resolve there. So you would expect this to go to F sharp minor, but it goes to A major. Right, that's very similar. And then you have this. Again, a dominant on top of a tonic, augmented chord, suspension. Right, this part is very similar. I don't see any substantial changes because I think already it was a masterpiece the first time he did it. So basically he is just copying and pasting all of the same music and doing the very same ending, right? So there are no substantial changes on all of this part. Now, the way we've labeled it, and I would like to correct it now, is that you have this A2, this is this transitional idea, and then clearly we said that this was the recap, so this is A1 prime, after which well, Brahms is just well having these different ideas. Good, so now let's focus on the main part. As I said at the beginning, in my opinion, this is probably one of the most beautiful melodies written by Brahms and most beautiful sections. In particular, it features a transparent writing, which we can now look voice per voice, and probably we'll follow that approach. And it's a writing that's majestically developed in a polyrhythm. So you're having a rhythm of 2 division, 1 2 1 2 1 1 2 1 2, whereas the left hand goes in triplets. So that polyrhythm of 3 against 2 is very characteristic of Brahms's style. It gives a lot of complexity. And not that many composers at the time were so obsessed as Brahms was with polyrhythms, and in his pieces he not only just played with 3 against 2, he also has 4 against 3 and all these different combinations. So let's examine where is this material coming from. If we're looking at this and recall the original motives, we had the pink, which is the scale, so it's that scale and it's just appearing there, and then with an inversion, for instance, and then you're having the yellow, which are these thirds, right? So basically, or thirds or skips, basically this theme is not any original material, right? It's all based on the materials that we already saw in the first theme. And that derivation is extremely beautiful and powerful, because if you look at certain moments, they actually even sound exactly as the opening. So this is, that part is exactly the opening. But now Brahms is harmonizing it. Totally different, right? And it becomes actually the modal that he later on develops as a sequence. So if we look at this, this is a sequence where you have this thing repeated 3 times, each time a second below, lowered second. So it's a beautiful example of how you can basically derive from one theme a completely new theme without having to invent much original material. And at the same time, I think it's a master class of counterpoint, because that first part we already saw it, but this theme, which is there, it's imitated like a canon down there. So we have and then it goes in parallel 6. Repeated exactly there in the left hand, well, crossing between left and right. So that intricate close repetition of the theme in almost like this stretto form really resembles the type of writing you would find in Bach's fugues, where he's like overlapping. You'd have the themes clashing in really closely overlapping in creating this layer. And at the same time, you have the extreme beauty of these arpeggios. And Brahms somehow came up with the concept of not using the note value that he had so clearly established before. So apart from the fact that he's like masterfully starting on the down on the third beat, the arpeggios that we've described that, and then you have the emiola. So I probably didn't write the word here, emiola. Well, the emiola is actually appearing here too. So remember that emiola, we have 2/4 in 3/4 meter. So in this original meter of 3/4, we have 2/4, 1 2 1 2 1 2. In this, in addition to all of this rhythmic complexity, Brahms manages even further to add something new, which is this flow or triplets that complements and develops the previous arpeggios that we were seeing. And the way that he does it also is fascinating, because the normal way that composers would think of the arpeggios is again having the downbeat with the lowest note. That's not even closely the case in Brahms. You would have all of these different positions, which create a very asymmetrical feel. So you're feeling like it's 5 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 1. Right, so we start 5 3 3 1. It's very asymmetrical. Then you have 3 1 2, and then again 1 1 1 2 1. And in this case, probably this could be seen again as a good example of an emiola. I'll put it here rhythmically so you can see this would be the harmonic changes. So we have there a hidden 2/4 time signature. Right? It feels like 1 2 1 2 1 2. So that's the rhythmic complexity of that, and we haven't even started to comment about the harmony, which makes this theme so beautiful. I'll play it for you. So I think that Brahms allows us actually to play it twice in a way to also have the same concept that you had at the beginning. So the A theme, which was here, had a repetition of it, literally A1 prime. Of course, Brahms could have written here a repeat bar, but that would make this theme overly repetitive. It was already repetitive in itself. It was this period. So Brahms decides to add things to it, and some of the things he adds is this flat 6 interval, then we have this augmented chord, so he's harmonically trying to change things a little bit, and then he has that part. Whereas in this case, the music is so perfect, it's so good that he just decides to put the repeat bar. And one of the things that I encourage performers to do is that if you're playing this passage, make sure to one of the times play the top melody the loudest, and then the second time, as I was trying to do in my performance, play this line louder. So we have like this balance between the two main melodic lines that are present. All right, so now without further ado, let's comment the harmony. It's an F sharp minor. F sharp minor is the relative key of A major, so it's harmonically it's not too complicated. It's a relationship. It's a median relationship again. So a median relationship is the one that we have by thirds. Look how Brahms was going from A to, had C major, A to F major, now A to F sharp. You might be wondering where was that? I just bring your attention to the C major. had this F major, and now we have F sharp. So he's really trying to explore these relationships that are at a distance of a third, which also is partly this, the whole concept of the piece. Motivically, we have this third, which makes it so perfect. And then in the F sharp minor, harmonically, the harmony is not clearly going in the very traditional sense of tonic to dominant, but he's smoothly transitioning from tonic here to this subdominant, right, with the seventh, and then from there we're arriving to different chords. Actually, we're going to this A major, which is the third degree, right? And from the A major we're going to the D major, which is the sixth. A major. We're going to this sixth, major sixth, by the way. And after that major sixth, Brahms is going to C sharp, which is the dominant 5, and then 1. Now, but at the same time that this is happening, there's a circle of fifths. And the circle of fifths is really masterfully hidden. So you have this, as I said, A major chord, right? So I'll highlight where is the, probably give it another color. So make it red. Now we have this. All right, that's not what I wanted. So I'll put the outline red. We have this A, goes to D, goes to G, goes to C sharp, and C sharp goes to F. That's literally the circle of fifths. Yeah. And that A actually comes from an E right before it. So yeah, you have the whole series. E would have to be preceded by B, which is there, and B would have to be preceded by F sharp. So literally he's connecting all of the notes, right? Maybe that could be shifted to this E. And that's really what it does. So we have and that's how Brahms connects basically, well, the entire theme. So we have B, E, A, D, G, C sharp. And harmonically, we have in this A major, which goes E and A, D have diminished, D dominant. So by the way, we're missing that one. There's actually second degree. So you have there. When you're having 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, that's a circle of fifths. Right. Second time, Brahms, with that perfect harmonization, could have just repeated it. And again, he's doing the very same concept. And the concept is that first, he presents the tonic to the dominant, and then he presents the path to the dominant through a modulation, right? Through this dominant of the dominant chord. And here he is exactly doing the same. You have the path of the tonic to the dominant, and then we're having the path of this tonic through a modulation, the dominant of the dominant, right? And that really gives us a very parallel feel of harmonic development between A and B, right? And in order to keep things more interesting, he does, of course, this D major chord, which is a remarkable reference to the original, right? The D major. And then that goes to C sharp minor. And the relationship between these two is the one that Beethoven loved the most and used really a lot in his music, and is what I call the Neapolitan. right? So here you have a Neapolitan of C sharp minor. And actually it goes to the chord of C sharp minor right after. So that's the way that Brahms uses the modulation to the dominant. And it's a particularly surprising one. So you can call it actually not a modulation, but secondary dominant that goes to the dominant. But it acts like the feel that we're going and modulating there. So let's do it in A minor. I'm in A minor. I want to go to the dominant, so I think of the Neapolitan of the dominant. The dominant is E, Neapolitan is F. And then from there I can go already to E. And that's the chord progression. So it's going to be A minor, F major, B with E minor, E major. And it's exactly this same chord progression you have here. Dominant seventh. Whereas the first time it's a little bit more straightforward. Where it's like slowly speeding up. And doing a circle of a fifth in order to return. Second time, Neapolitan of this perfect cadence, which actually sounds as if we were doing this. C sharp minor, we're having the Neapolitan, then we're doing the tonic in second inversion, then we're doing the dominant seventh, and then we're doing what I call the Picardy third. Here, so it's there, tonic, major, Picardy third. It's the same concept that you would see in Bach's pieces that are in minor, and in major, right? So we have there a Baroque hint. That's clearly C sharp minor. Neapolitan, C sharp minor. That's very Brahms sound. So after that, let's look at what happens the second time. So this theme has an inner part, B2, that's going to be the last thing that we'll look into the piece. Because it's like this little mirror. You have this A, then B1, middle section B3, that's like the center of it. And then it's like in the mirror, B1 repeats, and then you have the outer A, right? I would like to think of it, if I were to write the form of it in a little tree, I would have this B2 here in the middle. Then you have from this in both directions B1, which we're analyzing right now with a variation. That's what we're going to analyze next. And after that, in the outer part, you're having A. Like this perfectly symmetrical form that goes almost like this pyramid, where you're having the repetition of the themes in a mirror shape. So let's go with B1. B1 is a jewel of counterpoint, because Brahms is making even more explicit the concept of his invention, which was to do the melody, right, and have this repetition. But in order to make it more explicit, what Brahms does is he's just changing and swapping the order of the voices. So originally it was the soprano that was answered by the tenor. Now we have the tenor singing, and the sopranos answering. first phrase is circle of fifths, as I said before. The main remarkable thing is, of course, that swapping of the voices. So how he is swapping the soprano and the tenor, right? So this is like the remarkable counterpoint. It's invertible counterpoint technically, right? So what makes it invertible is the fact that it's organized by thirds and sixths. We have sixth, third, third, third. Right. And the second time we're seeing again this same sequence, but now it's slightly different because we don't start with the tenor. He doesn't continue with swap, but rather he actually creates a new melody. So the original melody started with an F as the highest note. Second time it went to A. And now we're going to the highest. And this is like a very strategically organized discourse. So you're having again, and eventually that's the final one, which he does again with the same Neapolitan feel, but it's slightly different because he doesn't want to modulate. So we can no longer call it Neapolitan. Now it's just a descending set of thirds, right? You're having F going to D and D going to the Neapolitan here, G, after which we have the perfect cadence. So harmonically, this part is unique. It's different. You have tonic. You have the 6th degree, again with that G sharp that gives us the Lydian feel. And it becomes an augmented chord here, by the way. Then that goes to B minor, that's the 2nd degree, which becomes a Neapolitan, it's G major, and the cadence is the same. Cadential 4/6, he even enriches with this dominant of the dominant feel, diminished, dominant, and tonic. So you have cadential. Right. If I were to write it like this, I would put 1C. That's the dominant of the dominant. Then you have the dominant and then the tonic. And that preceded by a Neapolitan chord. And all of this is really appearing from a descending set of thirds. F, D, B, G. And then that's C. Then we have the motive. Harmonically, it's not very complex. What this transition does, it goes from the tonic to the 4th degree of D major, which goes to the, so we're going from F sharp minor to A major. In the key of A major, we're having this 4, 5, and then dominant of the dominant. And the way that we explain the first chord is through a 6, right? So that explanation is really based on the same concept of moving by thirds. So you're going from F sharp, you're moving to D major. That's it. So D major and D. So F goes to D, and once you have D, it's 4, 5, 1. But of course, that would be a normal thing. But remember that this 5 of 5 supposedly just resolves in this only last beat, because prior to that Brahms is not really presenting us with that idea. So he is going to be staying on the subdominant a lot of the time, and he's just going to be doing this Lydian feel of D, E, D, E, D, E, D. right? And well, and the materials, of course, of this part, I think they're clear. They're these descending seconds that actually become that, and the arpeggios are clearly, well, the ascending arpeggios that are going to become those descending ones there, and also part of that little cell that we were having, right? So basically Brahms is connecting through that all of the music, right? Now let's then analyze and focus on the core or the heart of the piece, which is this più lento una corda legato pianissimo part. Una corda meaning that you need to put the left pedal, so we have only one string being hit instead of three. That's kind of the original concept. What right now happens is that in pianos they shift the keyboard, and rather than having three strings you usually have two, and the places that you would have two you'd have one or half. And the imitation here, it's exactly the same concept. You have a canon, so but what you can clearly see is that it's the parallel key. It's F sharp major. Now, how do we explain or understand F sharp major? It's very simple. There are two ways. It's the parallel of the relative. So you have the relative key that was F sharp minor. Sorry, you have the relative keys that was F sharp minor, yes. So A major, it's F sharp minor, and that F sharp minor now becomes major. But at the same time, it's the last piece that we were seeing in this median modulation that we were talking about in the case of going from A major to C major, A major to F major, and now A major to F sharp. It's that really far away relationship. It says also più lento, so this part is supposed to be played particularly slow, for the main reason that harmonically it's one of the most sophisticated enharmonic pieces of modulation in this intermezzo. So this starts with F sharp major, that's the first degree, nothing particularly complex about that one. So it's F sharp major tonic. Then we're having this very unique chord, which is the third degree. It's A sharp minor. How do we see F sharp minor and A major? They're very modern harmonies. These are the common tone relationships I was talking about. And that goes we have third, we have it again there, right? Playing with B flat minor, A sharp minor, sorry, that goes to E flat minor. E flat minor is the sixth degree, and it's again a minor degree. And then after that sixth degree, minor degree, we're going to A sharp minor again. So this is a perfect example of an Aeolian cadence. Aeolian cadences are based on the cadences that are in a minor key but have no leading tone. So if I were to have this in A sharp minor, it would sound like this. Sorry. You have A B flat, A sharp minor, then you have like that, right? So you have A sharp minor, dominant, and if we were to have it in the key of E flat, that would be the normal thing. So we'd have E flat minor, B dominant seventh, and E flat minor. But in this case, what you're seeing is you're seeing B flat minor or A sharp minor with their equivalent, and that goes to D sharp minor. Right, so Brahms is really like playing there with the first cadence. It's a 5-1 of A sharp minor, of D sharp minor, and then again another cadence of D sharp minor. So if we were to see these are Aeolian cadences in the key of D sharp minor. Now I'm struggling so much to explain because I really like to think of E flat minor. It's easier for me to think in terms of flats when I'm talking about these keys. So I would think of E flat minor, which is D sharp minor. And that would be the Aeolian scale. The harmonic scale is this. Well, that's the melodic, and this is the harmonic. So they have the leading tone. We would have this. But here Brahms is doing, which is a very modern sound, and we're arriving basically to D sharp, which is the tritone, or the farthest place you can get in the key of A major. So if you're in A, the farthest note you can go is to D sharp. And that's what we're having here. So it's A major, that cadence to D sharp, another cadence to D sharp, and again. So he's basically alternating always this 3 and the 6. And 3 and 6, by the way, in the key of F sharp, which is the original, it's the median relationship, a third above and a third below. So if we were to replicate this in the key of C major, which makes more sense to many people, you would have this. Right. So I'm C major, and from there I'm going to E minor, then A minor, E minor, A minor, E minor, A minor, always. And that's the Aeolian feel. Now, Brahms does it in this apparently very complex key, which is D sharp minor. With the canon that we already highlighted, which is that descending fourth, it's presented there, and we're having it with the same imitation. So you have it for several chords. And after this, Brahms is doing this extremely fascinating move from sharps to flats. Right? So what is he doing? Let's think it from the key of F sharp, which is where he's going. That's clearly sounding like a 5-1. So we're having here a 5-1 in the key of A sharp. This is very enharmonic, A sharp minor. And then that A sharp minor, 5-1, is followed by a 5-1 and F sharp major. So if I were to do this chord progression just by itself, I would do if we were to think this in the key of C major, right? So the first thing to do would be to pick B major, so it would sound like this. Right? I'm doing the dominant of E minor and then the dominant of the tonic. It's the dominant of the third. Again, third is this median relationship, and then 5-1. And here is sound. Now, the only thing that we need to now explain is how does he go to F major if we were in F sharp, right, or in this D sharp, and it's through this chord. So that chord, technically from the key of A sharp minor, it's just 2-5-1. There isn't anything particularly special about it, but the relationship or connection it has to D sharp minor, which was the previous chord, is fascinating. So you have this going there, right? So if we were to interpret the entire passage from the key of A sharp minor, I think we could get a quite interesting picture, because you would have the D sharps as the fourth degree. So we're having this 4-1 feel, plagal feel. And then that 4-1 is going to 2-5-1. It's really quite straightforward if you think it that way. And probably I can play it now in C major so you could see it. So I'm in E minor. That's exactly what he does. So I'll put it here above, and then you can double check these chords, because of course this is particularly enharmonic and chromatic. But in the key of F sharp minor, which is technically and officially, I think, the key that he's using here, we can see 1, 4, 1. That's plagal cadences. I'll keep writing these. 4, 1, 4, 1. And then he's doing 2 diminished, 5. And that's how we explain this passage. So we're seeing C major, then and that goes now in the key of F sharp. Looks particularly complicated, and it arrives at this enharmonic solution, which I really don't think that it was completely justified or unnecessary if you think it from the concept of A sharp minor, or he could have just written everything in B flat minor and it would be way easier. So now we arrive at the last phrase, and Brahms could have repeated that phrase twice because it was quite genius and beautiful, but he does something different. Which is all of this harmonization. So what is happening here? Let's break it down. In this case, it's not going to A sharp minor, which was the mediant, but he is rather staying more clearly in F sharp. And of course, there's this first hint of that A sharp minor with the 3rd degree. But after that, he is clearly going dominant of the dominant and dominant, dominant of the dominant and dominant. And after that, we arrive to this, which is a suspension with a 9th of the dominant. So all of that is the dominant chord, but he's using these beautiful suspensions with a cadential 4/6 and dominant. So here we can see the clearest example of the dominant, which is the dominant 7th. Here is the first inversion, the second inversion of the tonic, which is working very nicely there. Then you have this suspended sonority. So that's technically partly that same dominant 7th, but with a suspension. How is it explained? Because you have that imitation that's leading across. So Brahms is still playing with that concept, and you have it there. And before that, you have a clear dominant 7th here, right? So it's that one. And that's the fermata sign, right? At which we'll be leaving this analysis. So as you can see, this is a very unique piece in terms of compositional techniques. It's called intermezzo, which in an ideal meaning would mean just a piece that's an interlude to something, right? I believe in Brahms's case, it's clearly not something that you would take lightly. I mean, it's a short piece, so it could be the equivalent of a nocturne in terms of length, but composition-wise, it's a masterpiece of all of the contrapuntal maturity that Brahms was acquiring throughout all of these years. So that's going to be the end of the analysis. If you've made it this far, please make sure to share this analysis with other people you might think might be interested in. I've mentioned at the beginning of the video, I would love to hear from you. You could write in the comment where are you from and what's your musical background, and also what are your musical interests, and what would you like to see more in this channel. So See you next week and hope you have a great week. Thank you for watching.